Yes, guys, how you doing? Sean Butler here from the newly branded Shameless Football. This is now called Sean Butler TV, at least temporarily. We're going in a different direction. I hope you are all happy and healthy, doing the things you love. We got some smashing news coming out of the Premier League tonight. The Premier League have got together and have all voted in a certain direction on a specific topic relating to the ability for clubs who may look to engage in sponsorship deals from third parties that have closer relationships than those that really pass the smell test. It's quite interesting. Lots to get through in a very short video. So before we get into it, guys, please do me a favor. Smash the like button for me. As the banner here says, hit the subscribe if you're new around these here parts. And if you haven't already found me over on the Spurs Talk Show, the main channel, then please also get over there and hit the subscribe over there, where we deal mainly with Tottenham content. But this is more of a kind of everything content. Hit the notification bell and drop a comment as well. Let me know your thoughts on today's topics. Now, we're going to get straight into it, guys. And we're going to start off with Martin Ziegler's conversation on Twitter this morning, or this lunchtime it came out. And it was saying that the Premier League clubs have approved tougher new rules on associated party deals, i.e. sponsorship and player transfers, by the closest of votes, 12 votes to 6, with 2 abstaining. One club, suggested to be Manchester City, has warned the Premier League it could face a legal challenge over these. Now, the Premier League statement that has been released by Martin Ziegler there as well, who says the Premier League and its clubs met over the past 2 days and held productive discussions in relation to a number of matters. This included plans to move towards a new financial settlement with the EFL, the English Football League, and to agree a long-term deal for the good of English football. A desire to seek a resolution on remaining issues was reiterated in the meetings, including a commitment to process and timeline with the continuation of discussions between the leagues. There's not much detail on what that looks like yet, so I'm going to skip past that. It says a number of Premier League clubs also held a productive meeting with EFL clubs this week to discuss these matters. To build on this momentum, conversations between clubs for the two leagues will now continue over the coming weeks. Again, not a lot of insight into what that looks like, but it looks like probably some sort of redistribution. Again, some sort of more equitable distribution within the kind of payment structures, the prize money or the TV media rights, those sorts of things, where the Premier League generally and the English football system is head and shoulders above the rest of the European leagues in terms of trying to distribute out to the smaller clubs, the grassroots clubs. And again, I'm massively speculating here, but I would imagine that is what it is about. And for what it's worth, what's good for the goose is good for the gander, so they say. In other European leagues, where the biggest and best teams get the lion's share of all of the money by a significant multiple above what happens in the Premier League and in the English system, that leads to situations where most of the clubs in Europe are broken. As a Tottenham fan, we've spoken about many times about the difficulty in being able to offload kind of second-tier players into second-tier markets, into the European ecosystem. It's become a nightmare for Tottenham over the last 4 or 5 years. Many other clubs go through the same process. And what would be wonderful is if those clubs in Europe could also benefit from a more equitable distribution of monetary values as well. Time will tell whether that happens, but it looks like the Premier League in England or the British system is taking further steps in that direction. So only good news. In regards to the other stuff, though, it says, in other matters, following a full review of the existing associated party transaction rules and fair market value assessment protocols, clubs agreed to a series of amendments to further enhance the efficiency and accuracy of the system. Clubs also agreed to a Premier League environmental sustainability commitment, which include a minimum standard of action on environmental issues across the clubs and the league. The commitment outlines 4 operational measures which will build on existing action made by clubs to reduce their environmental impact and provide a foundation to underpin long-term environmental ambitions. All very good news, as the being green kind of movement is incredibly growing, incredibly important in the eyes of the powers that be. And it seems like the Premier League clubs are once again trying to take the lead on those endeavours, which is important to see, as long as it doesn't necessarily add too much cost to the day-to-day match-going fan, then why wouldn't you want to be more economically and eco-friendly at the same time? Let's move away from this particular tweet and article statement from Martin Ziegler and look at the way that this is just one of the articles that are out that have come out in relation to this. And it's talking about the specific club that is likely or thought to be the one that's considering legal action as the Premier League attempts crackdown on related party commercial deals. So it says, Premier League, the proposed Premier League rule changes on commercial deals between related parties have been challenged by a club reported to be Manchester City. What happened? The Premier League wants to tighten associated party transactions, ATP rules, which would stop teams from being able to sign commercial deals at inflated prices with sponsors the club or its owners may already have close connections with. Sky News has reported that the Premier League has told its 20-member clubs that one of them has warned of launching potential arbitration proceedings to stop the changes going ahead, with 115 charges of breaching financial rules already hanging over them, and having also previously expressed objection to such tighter APT regulations. City are rumoured to be that club. The bigger picture here, according to this article, says the more income a club makes through its various revenue streams, the more they can potentially spend on transfer fees and wages. Bringing in extra commercial revenue is the best way to get ahead of the competition in terms of bringing in more money to grow the budget. But there have been long-standing allegations against Manchester City, who brought in a Premier League record revenue of £712.8 million in 2022-23 season, of striking commercial deals with Abu Dhabi-based firms as a way of bypassing financial fair play rules. They have been repeatedly accused since 2018 by German magazine Der Spiegel, in particular, of bending financial rules. City have always denied the wrongdoing. Just to quickly finish the article, what's next for Manchester City? Well, they have got their hearing that starts at some point in the next few months, apparently, maybe October of this year, although no date has been fixed, where they will have to answer some of the charges on 115 charges that have been brought against City by the Premier League for various breaches of financial regulations between 2009 and 2018. The complexity of the case is unlikely to bring any resolution anytime soon. Yada, yada, yada. Let's look, guys, in a nutshell, when you combine this situation, so in a nutshell, this is going to hurt either Manchester City or, in all likelihood, the other club that, if it's not Manchester City, the club that it may be is, of course, Newcastle United, who also have, they find themselves under a bit of a bottleneck right now. Newcastle United fans must be absolutely seething that they have the richest family, the richest investment fund, the richest wealth fund in history, I guess you would call it, and certainly alive today, that owns their football club. And yet they, because of the stringent rules around profit and sustainability and financial fair play, both in the Premier League and in UEFA, find themselves unable at the moment to be able to spend that. Obviously, Newcastle United can go on and do all sorts of improvements to their infrastructure that might be able to eventually raise the revenue number, which in turn allows them to spend more and have more money associated as costs. But until those things happen, they are handcuffed to the rules. The rules, of course, right now, for the Premier League specifically, teams have to juggle two different sets of rules. One is around the current PSR rules in the Premier League, which says that you're allowed to lose a maximum of £105 million per year, over a 3-year rolling period. But that may, in fact, actually change very soon to become more in line with the overarching UEFA rules, which are very different, although you would imagine that they are very much overlapping the other set of rules that the Premier League currently makes teams abide by. The rules in under UEFA are more around you are only allowed to spend a percentage of the revenue that your club generates. And obviously, at the start of this particular rule last season, 90% was the limit of the amount of revenue that 90% of your revenue could be spent on the aggregated combination of your transfer fees over any particular year, your wages, your staff wages, and agents' fees. Now, last year that moved to 80%, and next year it will become a 70% cap, and that's where it will stop. The reductions will then stop at 70% and maintain at that level, which essentially means that whatever a club generates in revenue, the club cannot spend any more than 70% of that number on the combination of wages, transfer fees, and agents' fees. And so, in an ideal world, every club needs to raise the revenue number as high as it possibly can be, so that in turn they can then spend more money of as a consequence of raising the number. The 70% cap of that number will raise in turn with the higher revenue numbers. And one of the ways in which clubs can raise their revenue numbers is by finding juicy contracts through sponsorship deals. Now, Manchester City, part of the 115 charges that they face is that they have sponsorship deals with companies that may appear on paper to be separate and independent of the ownership of Manchester City, which is owned by Abu Dhabi. But in reality, if you are familiar with the way that the way that companies work in Abu Dhabi, all of them essentially are owned in some sort of form or fashion by the royal family of Abu Dhabi, who also own Etihad and, of course, Manchester City. And so this particular rule that would say that you're not allowed to be able to have sponsorship deals, or the rules around the idea of having sponsorship deals from companies that appear to be independent but actually have close connections with the owner of the football club, will be tightened, will make it more and more difficult for Manchester City to be able to continue their working relationships with the sorts of clubs, or with the sorts of companies that up until now appear to be independent, but ultimately are still owned in part or on paper, or even theoretically, hypothetically, by the same family who own the football club. And that is, of course, part of the accusation that currently sits on the 115 charges, that Manchester City, through a number of sponsorships, not just their sponsorship with Etihad, the Airways that owns the stadium rights, but through other companies as well, that for all intents and purposes have no visible, viable, obvious product or service to sell, that when looked into, when analyzed and researched and investigated, appeared to be simply businesses that would have an office somewhere with maybe one person, one employee sat there all day long, and a PO box that would be sponsoring the football club for millions of dollars or millions of euros or millions of pounds, but had no known benefit. But under investigation, the ties from that particular company went straight back to the Abu Dhabi family, the royal family who own Manchester City. And so all of those sorts of things are under scrutiny in the 115 charges, and will, if these rules are allowed to continue, will once again make it more and more difficult for Manchester City to be able to operate under the same vision that they have. For what it's worth, though, I don't think Manchester City will need to worry too much about that. They are one of the biggest clubs in the world. They are one of the biggest brands in football. And for sure, they can go out and earn different sponsorship deals from viable companies that have no known connection to the football club, but will still see the connection, that the idea of sponsoring Manchester City as valuable, and that will generate a very healthy, reasonable sum in terms of revenue streams. Manchester City have also spent the last 10 years of their ownership, 15 years of their ownership, figuring out how to increase their revenues through a multitude of different ways. And through their City Football Group multi-club ownership model, have almost built a near perfect ecosystem where it's not just Manchester City that are seeing the benefits, but obviously teams all over Europe and the world combined. So I'm not entirely sure if this particular rule change will do that much damage to Manchester City's ability to generate the revenues that it already generates. But if it is them that are fighting this, then maybe they're fighting it on principle rather than anything else. Of course, it doesn't necessarily mean it is them. It might be someone else, like a Newcastle United, who are potentially looking to take advantage of the wealth that they have via their Saudi Arabian PIF fund. And they currently can't do that because their club hasn't really generated the revenues, or doesn't generate anything like the revenues that Manchester City's does, despite having their first sort of success, or maybe we'll call it unsuccessful, venture into the Champions League from last year's fantastic Premier League season under Eddie Howe. I'm not entirely convinced it is Manchester City. It probably is Manchester City that are putting this objection up. But either way, it just goes to show you that the Premier League and the clubs that are within it are doing everything they can now to take a more scrutiny around the financial side of these football clubs and how they have generated success. And if everything, whether or not everything is as squeaky clean as some of the clubs that are accused would have you believe that they are, that they are, or that they have been. Time will tell. I can imagine, as a Tottenham fan, that Daniel Levy was 100% one of the clubs who voted for this measure, for this movement. And we will see. We will see what happens. But That is the latest in the ever-changing, ever-moving financial side of football that is becoming more and more involved, more and more of a talking point for fans. Never before in my life have I seen a situation where the financial side of football becomes a daily, day-to-day talking point for all clubs in the Premier League. And of course, now, obviously, with this other part of the news today, dripping down into the English Football League as well. If you enjoy this sort of side of football, then the Sean Butler TV YouTube channel, this is exactly what we're going to be talking about. For those of you who don't know, I do have a lot of sort of historical connection to football finance, or to finance generally, and some of my escapades have moved into the football side of finance. But ultimately, this is a passion of mine, something I'm very interested in, and will continue to try to break these topics down as best I can as we move forward. Let me know if you enjoy it, guys. Let me know what your thoughts are. Are Manchester City going to sort of keep kicking and screaming regarding all this stuff? And do you think this is going to have any impact on them with their 115 charges? I don't think it will. I think the 115 charges speak for themselves, and time will tell what will happen in that regard whenever that court date comes out. Like, subscribe, and comment, guys. And as always, I haven't thought of an exit. I was about to say, come on, you Spurs, but I can't do that here. Like, subscribe, and comment, guys. And as always, bye bye.